Growing up in the Martinez household meant understanding the hierarchy from an early age. Elena, my older sister by 4 years, was destined to be the family success story: pre-med at Northwestern, acceptance to medical school, residency at Mayo Clinic, and now a thriving orthopedic surgery practice in downtown Seattle. I was the creative one, which in our family was code for the one who'll probably struggle financially forever. Music isn't a career, Mija, Mom would say whenever I talked about my dreams of working in the industry. It's a hobby. Elena is going to save lives. What are you going to do, play guitar on street corners? The comments stung, but they weren't entirely unfair. By the time I turned 30, my music career looked exactly like what my family had predicted. A series of small gigs, session work that barely paid rent, and a collection of songs I'd written that no one seemed interested in hearing. I lived in a cramped apartment in East Nashville, sharing space with 2 roommates and surviving on a diet that consisted primarily of ramen and whatever free food I could find at music industry events. Elena, meanwhile, had everything our parents had dreamed of for their daughters. She owned a beautiful home in an upscale Seattle neighborhood, drove a BMW, and could afford to take vacations to Europe whenever she felt like it. More importantly, she had the respect and admiration of our entire extended family. Dr. Martinez, they called her at family gatherings, always emphasizing the title. I was just Sophia, or more often, Elena's sister who's still trying to make it in music. The pattern was established early and reinforced constantly. Elena's achievements were celebrated with family dinners and Facebook posts that garnered hundreds of likes from relatives. My small victories, landing a session gig with a touring band, having one of my songs featured on a local radio station, getting hired to write jingles for a small advertising agency, were met with polite smiles and immediate redirections to more important topics. "That's nice, honey," Mom would say when I shared good news about my work. Elena just published another research paper in the Journal of Orthopedic Surgery. Did you see the article about her in the hospital newsletter? It wasn't that my family was deliberately cruel. They loved me in their way. But they decided long ago that Elena was the daughter who would bring honor to the family name, while I was the one they'd have to support emotionally and sometimes financially, through a series of artistic disappointments. The breaking point came when Elena announced her engagement to Robert Chin, a successful cardiologist she'd met during her residency. The wedding planning became a year-long celebration of everything Elena had achieved: her career, her financial stability, her ability to attract an equally successful partner. "We're thinking about a destination wedding," Elena told us during one of our monthly family dinners. "Maybe somewhere in Italy. Robert's family has connections there." Dad nearly choked on his wine. "Italy? Elena, that's going to be expensive." "We can afford it," she said with a shrug that somehow managed to be both casual and smug. "Between my practice and Robert's salary, money isn't really an issue." The implication was clear. Unlike some people in the family, Elena had made responsible choices that led to financial security. I kept eating my enchiladas and tried to ignore the familiar sting of comparison. The wedding planning consumed our family's conversations for months. Every dinner became a discussion of venue options, catering menus, guest lists, and flower arrangements. Elena basked in the attention, holding court like a benevolent queen, dispensing updates about her perfect life to her grateful subjects. "Sophia should sing at the ceremony," Mom suggested during one of these planning sessions. "She has such a beautiful voice." Elena's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of micro-expression that siblings learn to read after decades of practice. "That's sweet, Mom, but we're hiring professional musicians. This isn't really the right venue for, well, you know." The sentence hung unfinished, but everyone understood what she meant. My amateur music wasn't appropriate for her sophisticated wedding to her successful doctor fiancé. "I could write something special," I offered, immediately regretting the desperation in my voice. "Maybe something just for the reception?" "We've already hired a band," Elena said firmly. "But thank you for offering." The rejection shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. This was my sister, the person who used to sneak into my room to hear me practice guitar when we were kids, who'd once told me I was the most talented person she knew. Success had changed her, or maybe it had just revealed who she'd always been underneath the childhood affection. 3 months before the wedding, I got a call that would change everything, though I didn't realize it at the time. "Sophia Martinez?" The voice was professional, crisp, with a slight British accent. "Speaking." This is James Worthington from Atlantic Records. I'm a senior A&R representative, and I've been listening to some demos that came across my desk. Your name was on several of them as a songwriter and producer. My heart stopped. Atlantic Records was calling me? Yes, I've done some writing and production work. Quite impressive work, actually. We're looking for someone with your particular style to work on a project with one of our major artists. The timeline is aggressive. We'd need you in the studio starting next week, but the compensation would be substantial. The next 20 minutes felt like a dream. James explained that they needed someone to produce and co-write songs for an album by Maya Chin, a pop artist whose last 2 records had gone platinum. Maya had specifically requested someone whose work she'd heard on some indie tracks, and my name had come up repeatedly in industry circles as an emerging talent. The thing is, James said, this would be a significant time commitment. We're talking about potentially 6 months of intensive work, including some travel for recording sessions. The artist is quite particular about maintaining creative momentum once she starts a project. I can do that, I said immediately. Excellent. We'll start with a 3-song trial. If those work out well, we'll discuss a full album deal. The compensation for the trial period alone would be $150,000, with substantial bonuses if the songs perform well commercially. After hanging up, I sat in my tiny apartment staring at the walls covered with musical equipment and half-finished song lyrics. $150,000 was more than I'd made in the previous 3 years combined. But more than the money, this was the opportunity I'd been working toward for over a decade. The next 6 months were the most intense of my life. Maya Chin turned out to be not just talented but genuinely collaborative, interested in pushing boundaries and creating something meaningful rather than just commercially viable. We worked 12-hour days in state-of-the-art studios, bringing in session musicians I'd only dreamed of working with, crafting songs that felt both innovative and accessible. You have an ear for this, Maya told me during one late-night session. Most producers try to impose their vision on my voice. You're helping me find sounds I didn't know I was capable of. The album, titled Metamorphosis, was unlike anything Maya had done before and unlike anything I'd done before. It was bold, experimental, deeply personal, and somehow completely infectious. When we finished the final track, both of us knew we'd created something special. But the music industry moves slowly, and I was sworn to secrecy about the project until the official announcements were made. 4 months, I went back to my regular life. Session work, small gigs, family dinners where Elena dominated conversations about her wedding plans, while sitting on the biggest secret of my career. Are you even working these days? Elena asked during one family dinner, 2 months before her wedding. You seem to have a lot of free time lately. I've been in the studio quite a bit, I said, which was technically true. Still doing those little demos? She asked with the tone she might use to discuss a child's art project. That's nice. Keeps you busy. The condescension was nothing new, but it felt different now. I was carrying knowledge that would fundamentally change how my family saw me, but I couldn't share it yet. Instead, I had to sit there and absorb Elena's subtle put-downs while counting down the days until the album release. Elena's wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in June at an expensive venue overlooking Elliott Bay. She'd managed to pull together the kind of elegant affair that would be talked about in family circles for years: perfectly coordinated flowers, a string quartet, a 7-course dinner that probably cost more than my annual rent. I arrived at the reception wearing a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, something that looked expensive enough to fit in with Elena's crowd but hadn't actually broken my budget. The guest list was exactly what I'd expected. Successful doctors, lawyers, business executives, and their equally successful spouses. I was seated at a table with some distant cousins and family friends, far from the head table where Elena and Robert held court. The reception followed the predictable script. Toasts praising Elena's achievements, stories about her dedication to her medical career, congratulations on finding such a perfect match in Robert. Everyone spoke about her success, her intelligence, her bright future. I smiled and applauded at the appropriate moments while mentally preparing myself for the inevitable moment when someone would ask about my own career prospects. That moment came during the cocktail hour, when Elena decided to introduce me to some of Robert's colleagues from the hospital. "This is my sister Sophia," she said, her arm around my shoulders in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt performative. "She's our family's creative spirit." "What kind of work do you do?" asked Dr. Anderson, Robert's department head, with the polite interest that successful people show when they're trying to be gracious to someone they assume is less accomplished. Before I could answer, Elena jumped in with a laugh that was meant to sound fond but came out slightly mocking. Sophia's been trying to make it in the music industry for years. She writes songs, does some studio work. Very artistic. Failed art career, she announced to the small group that had gathered around us, her voice carrying that particular tone that siblings use when they're sharing an embarrassing family story. She's been struggling for years, she laughed, looking around the group for validation of her assessment. The words hit me like a physical blow, made worse by the setting in the audience. These were Elena's colleagues, people who represented the kind of success our family valued, and she was presenting me as the cautionary tale, the sister who'd made poor life choices and was paying the predictable price. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I'd had years of practice at managing these situations. Art is tough, I said quietly, giving Elena the response she expected, the acknowledgement of failure that would allow the conversation to move on to more comfortable topics. But as the group prepared to shift their attention back to Elena's achievements and wedding plans, my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost ignored it. This was Elena's moment, and I wasn't going to be the person who answered a call during her wedding reception. But something made me glance at the screen, and I saw a number I didn't recognize with a Los Angeles area code. For reasons I still can't explain, I decided to answer it. Sophia Martinez? The voice was excited, professional, crackling with energy. Yes, this is Sophia. This is Patricia Williams from the Recording Academy. I'm calling with some fantastic news. Congratulations, you've been nominated for a Grammy Award for Producer of the Year for your work on Maya Chen's Metamorphosis album. The world stopped. The conversation around me, Elena's laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, the string quartet playing in the background, all faded into white noise. I was vaguely aware that the group was still standing there, waiting for me to finish my call so they could continue discussing Elena's medical career. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I managed to say. You've been nominated for Producer of the Year. The album has been nominated in 4 categories total: Album of the Year, Best Pop Vocal Album, Producer of the Year for You, and Song of the Year for Invisible Threads, which you co-wrote. The nominations will be announced publicly tomorrow morning, but we always call nominees first to give them a heads up. I looked up and saw Elena staring at me with growing irritation. Her wedding reception was not the appropriate place for me to take phone calls, especially not calls that were drawing attention away from her and her accomplishments. The Grammy Awards ceremony is in February, Patricia continued. You'll be receiving an official invitation and of course we'll want to arrange interviews with the music press. This is a tremendous honor, especially for someone so early in their producing career. Maya Chen specifically requested that we reach out to you first. She wanted to make sure you knew how much this nomination means to the entire team. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is incredible. Congratulations again, Sophia. We'll be in touch soon with more details. I hung up the phone and looked at the group of people still standing around me, Elena, Robert, Dr. Anderson, and several other medical professionals who'd been prepared to offer polite condolences about my failed artistic ambitions. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Elena's smile had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of confusion and growing alarm. What was that about? She asked, her voice tight with control. I've been nominated for a Grammy Award, I said, the words feeling surreal as they came out of my mouth. For Producer of the Year. Dr. Anderson's eyebrows shot up. A Grammy? As in the Grammy Awards? Yes. For an album I produced with Maya Chen. It's also nominated for Album of the Year. The group exchanged glances, trying to process this information. Elena looked like someone had just told her that gravity was no longer applicable in this particular location. Maya Chen? Robert asked. The pop singer? Her new album. Metamorphosis, I confirmed. We worked on it for 6 months. It went platinum last month. Elena's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. You never said you were working with Maya Chen. I was under a non-disclosure agreement until the album was released. I couldn't talk about it. But you've been. We thought you were. Elena struggled to find words that wouldn't sound as condescending as her earlier assessment of my career. You've been doing session work and small gigs. I've been doing a lot of things, I said. including producing one of the biggest albums of the year, apparently. Dr. Anderson was the first to recover from the shock. This is extraordinary. Grammy nominations are incredibly prestigious. Do you mind me asking, what does something like this mean for your career? It was a question I was still trying to answer myself. It means I'll probably have more opportunities to work with major artists. The financial compensation for this project alone has been substantial. Elena looked like she was going to be sick. The sister she just described as a failure to her husband's colleagues had apparently been secretly achieving the kind of success that most people can only dream about. How substantial? Robert asked, with the bluntness of someone accustomed to discussing money professionally. I hesitated. The numbers were almost embarrassing to say out loud, especially in contrast to how my family had perceived my financial situation. The producer fee for this album was $2.8 million. Plus royalties that should continue for years. The champagne glass in Elena's hand started to shake. $2.8 million? Dr. Anderson repeated. For one album? It's been #1 for 8 weeks, I explained. Maya's previous albums were very successful, so the label was willing to pay for the right producer. Apparently, I was the right producer. Elena set down her champagne glass carefully as if she was afraid she might drop it. The group around us had grown larger. Other wedding guests had noticed the intense conversation and were drifting over to see what was happening. Grammy nomination, Elena repeated slowly as if she was trying to make the words make sense. You're nominated for a Grammy. Producer of the Year, I confirmed, along with some of the biggest names in the industry. Mom appeared at my elbow, having noticed the commotion. What's everyone talking about? Sophia, who was on the phone. Before I could answer, Dr. Anderson jumped in with obvious excitement. Your daughter has been nominated for a Grammy Award. She produced Maya Chen's new album. Mom's face went through the same progression of expressions I'd seen on Elena's face moments earlier: confusion, disbelief, and slowly dawning realization. A Grammy? She asked weakly. For nominations, actually, I clarified. The album is up for Album of the Year too. The crowd around us was growing larger, and I could see Dad pushing through the other guests to find out what was causing such a stir at his daughter's wedding reception. Elena stood frozen in the center of it all, watching her carefully orchestrated celebration transform into something else entirely. This was supposed to be her day, her moment to shine in front of everyone who mattered to her, and instead everyone was talking about her sister's secret success. 4 Grammy nominations, someone repeated in an odd voice. Maya Chen, someone else added. That album is incredible. Did you know about this? Dad asked Mom, who shook her head in amazement. We had no idea, Mom said. We thought she was still doing small studio work. Elena finally found her voice again. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, and for the first time all evening she sounded less like the condescending older sister and more like someone who was genuinely hurt by being excluded from something so important. I couldn't, I said. Non-disclosure agreements are standard in the industry, especially for high-profile projects. I wasn't allowed to discuss any details until after the album was released and the label decided to submit it for Grammy consideration. But this is huge, Robert said, looking back and forth between Elena and me as if he was seeing our family dynamic for the first time. This is career-defining success. Elena's face was pale now, and I realized that she was processing more than just the surprise of my nomination. She was remembering years of condescending comments, dismissive remarks about my career, and most recently her announcement to this very group of people that I had a failed art career. Elena, I said quietly, I'm sorry this happened at your wedding. I didn't know they were going to call today. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with emotions that were far more complex than simple surprise or even embarrassment. No, she said finally, I'm the one who should apologize. What I said earlier about your career. I had no idea. The admission hung in the air between us, witnessed by her husband's colleagues and our parents and a growing crowd of wedding guests who were all trying to understand how the family failure had secretly become the family's biggest success story. It's okay, I said. You couldn't have known. But I should have supported you, Elena said, her voice getting stronger. Even if I didn't understand what you were doing, even if it looked like you were struggling, I should have been encouraging instead of what I was. The crowd around us had grown to include most of the wedding reception, And I realized that Elena's moment of public acknowledgement was happening in front of everyone she'd wanted to impress with her own achievements. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert said, raising his champagne glass and speaking loudly enough for the entire reception to hear. "I think we need to add another toast to tonight's celebration. To Sophia Martinez, Grammy nominee and apparently secret musical genius." The room erupted in applause and cheers, and I found myself accepting congratulations from dozens of people who an hour earlier had probably seen me as Elena's less successful sister. Elena stood beside me through it all, smiling and accepting congratulations on my behalf, but I could see the complexity of emotions playing across her face. Pride certainly, and genuine happiness for my success, but also something that looked like grief, perhaps for the sister relationship we might have had if she hadn't spent so many years convinced that my dreams were foolish. Later, after the reception had ended and the guest had gone home, Elena and I found ourselves alone on the venue's terrace overlooking the water. "I owe you more than just an apology," she said, still wearing her wedding dress but having kicked off the expensive shoes that had been pinching her feet all evening. "Elena, you don't." "Yes, I do." She turned to face me and I could see tears in her eyes. "I've been a terrible sister. For years I've been so focused on proving that I made the right choices, the responsible choices, that I completely dismissed your dreams. Worse than dismissed them, I mocked them. You were protecting me in your way," I said. "You didn't want me to get hurt by chasing something unrealistic." "No," she said firmly. "I was protecting myself. I was so invested in being the successful one, the one who had it all figured out, that I needed you to be the one who was struggling. It made me feel better about my own choices. The honesty was painful but necessary. We'd both known the dynamic existed, but neither of us had ever acknowledged it so directly. Your success doesn't diminish mine," I said. "You're an amazing doctor. You save people's lives. That matters. And your success doesn't diminish mine either," she replied. But I acted like it would. I acted like there was only room for one successful daughter in this family, and I'd already claimed that spot. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the water and processing the events of the evening. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said eventually. "Of course. When you were sitting there earlier listening to me tell everyone about your failed art career, and you knew you'd just been nominated for a Grammy, how did you not punch me in the face?" I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had all evening. "I thought about it. I would have deserved it. Maybe. But I've learned that success is its own revenge. I didn't need to defend myself because I knew that reality would speak louder than anything I could say." Elena nodded thoughtfully. Reality certainly spoke tonight. The Grammy Awards ceremony 4 months later was everything I'd dreamed of and more. I didn't win Producer of the Year. That honor went to a veteran producer whose body of work spanned decades, but Metamorphosis won Album of the Year, and Maya Chin thanked me specifically in her acceptance speech. "To Sophia Martinez," she said, holding the Grammy up to the audience, "who heard sounds in my voice that I didn't know existed and helped me create something I'm genuinely proud of." Elena was in the audience that night, having flown to Los Angeles specifically to support me. When the camera panned to my table during Maya's speech, you could see her in the background, crying and applauding with genuine pride and excitement. After the ceremony at one of the many after-parties, Elena pulled me aside. "I have something to tell you," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at my wedding, about how I treated you over the years, and I want to make some changes." "Elena, we've talked about this. We're good." "Let me finish," she said. "I'm thinking about taking a sabbatical from my practice. Maybe a year off to do some volunteer medical work overseas, or to explore some research opportunities I've been ignoring because they weren't as financially lucrative." "That sounds amazing. But what brought this on?" "Watching you tonight, seeing how happy you are doing work that you love, work that matters to you. It made me realize that I've been so focused on building a successful career that I forgot to think about whether it was actually fulfilling." She paused, looking around at the party full of musicians, producers, and industry professionals who were celebrating their passion for creating art. "I became a doctor because it was prestigious and financially secure. And I'm good at it and I do help people. But I don't love it the way you love music. I don't wake up excited about what I'm going to create that day." "There's nothing wrong with choosing security," I said. "Not everyone needs to be an artist. Maybe not. But everyone should have the chance to pursue what makes them feel alive." And I spent so many years convincing you that wasn't practical or realistic when really I was just jealous that you had the courage to try. Elena did take that sabbatical, spending 8 months doing medical work in Central America and then returning to Seattle to start a nonprofit clinic focused on providing healthcare to underserved communities. She makes less money now, but when we talk on the phone she sounds happier than she has in years. As for me, the Grammy nomination opened doors I'd never imagined. I've produced albums for artists across multiple genres, won several industry awards, and built a recording studio in Nashville that's become known for its innovative approach to sound design. But the moment that mattered most wasn't winning any award or achieving any particular milestone. It was standing on that terrace with Elena after her wedding, both of us finally honest about who we'd been to each other and who we wanted to be going forward. Success isn't just about achieving your dreams. Sometimes it's about proving that your dreams were worth pursuing in the first place, even when everyone around you thought they were impossible. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, it's about inspiring the people you love to pursue their own version of those dreams, even if it means admitting they were wrong about yours.